Had I known that the last hug I gave my son was going to be my last, I wouldn't have let go, because he gave the best bear hugs. And he was like, Mom, I've got it this time. And it was about 3 weeks later that we got the call that no parent ever wants to get. And he had passed away.
Hi, I'm Kristen Brunius, and this is the Overcomers Podcast. I'm so excited for you to hear the stories of incredible people overcoming trials and turning them into triumphs. From everyday moms and dads to entrepreneurs to community leaders and beyond, you'll see how everyone has a story of overcoming, and those stories are what connect us all. Let's hop right in. Hey everybody, welcome to the Overcomers Podcast. We're so glad you're here. This week we have Godsey with us, and she's going to be telling us a story about her son. But before we do that, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for taking time out of your day to be here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing. If you do not follow us on all the social medias, we're on Instagram and Facebook, and then we also are on Amazon, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, all the things. If you would do us a favor, hit follow, comment on the episode, share with a friend. All of those things just help to get the word out, and so more people can hear these very, very powerful stories. And so with that, and I should also say, this is the first episode I'm recording in 2026, and Crystal and I were talking before we started recording that there was just kind of a bit of a war that was going on. We had to reschedule several times because of different things that happened. And then even today, just kind of had to do a quick reschedule and then reschedule again. So Crystal, thank you for being flexible. It's just very appreciated. And I just want to declare that Satan did not win. And
That's
we are
right.
here. We are here and we're recording. Crystal, you are from Texas.
I am.
Yeah. And we were talking about how Texas is just ginormous, and it's like basically the size of Europe. And so you're from the Dallas area.
Yes.
So why don't I throw it to you and you take it away, and I'll just ask questions along the way.
Okay.
And we'll do that.
My name is Crystal, and I'm a devoted wife of 32 years to my amazing husband, Keith. I am a mom of two, my son, Hunter, who is forever 25, and to our daughter, Hannah, who is 23. And we have been in Flower Mound, Texas for 24 and a half years, and that's where we raised our family.
Love it.
So,
Love it.
Yes. Yeah. And I want to just share a little bit about who our son was, his struggle with addiction, and that there is hope out there, hope in Jesus.
Amen.
To know Hunter was to love Hunter. He was, from the time he was born, he had a larger than life personality. He had a beautiful heart and soul, and he was a mama's boy, big mama's boy. He loved to lay his head in my lap, even into his 20s. He
Really?
loved to do that, yes.
I love that.
Yeah, he loved for me to rub his head. He had a great sense of humor. That humor, it started at a very young age. He was fiercely protective of his family and his friends, and he always rooted for the underdog, and he was the type of person that would give you the shirt off his back if he needed it. So, yeah. He loved, he was a typical kid. He loved riding his bike, playing with his friends, skateboarding. We had a trampoline, so all the friends would end up in our backyard jumping, and my son, thankfully, was the only one who ever got hurt.
That's good.
The ER knew us by name. When he was grown, he was almost
Really?
and people called him, his nickname was Sasquatch. Yes, yeah. And that just stuck with him.
What year was he born?
He was born in 1996.
Okay. So, okay. When did you start to, when did addiction become an issue, a struggle for him?
Well, as we look back on it now, we can see the signs, stuff that he did or said. It probably started early high school. Yeah, he got his first DWI when he was 19.
Okay.
And he was in the Whataburger parking lot. I don't know if you know what a Whataburger is.
No, is that a
It's a burger joint. Like,
Whataburger? Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Your accent got me for a second there.
And he was pulling our boat. We had a little fishing boat, and he had some friends with him. And he got pulled over for a DWI. And because of that, we sold the boat.
Mm.
We're like, you know, that was a boundary that you crossed. And so we did sell the boat. And about 6 months later, and mind you, that was on Mother's Day weekend. Yeah.
Okay.
And so that was a very tough weekend.
Mm.
We all had plans. We were supposed to go to the movie that day. And of course, he spent all day in jail. So we couldn't go and do that. But about 6 months later, he entered his first rehab.
For alcohol? Okay. So the DWI was drugs?
No, it was alcohol.
It was alcohol. Okay.
We didn't know that he was doing drugs until one night. He was just in a very bad way. He was drunk, but he was also high on cocaine.
Mm.
And he was tired, tired of the lies. And I finally got him talking, and he said that he wanted help. And I will tell you, God was with us from the very beginning and has never left us. He was there through the first rehab, how we found the first rehab. I had a family member, or we had a family member, who had just gotten out of a rehab a couple of months before, and she helped us find a rehab here in the Dallas area.
Mm.
And it was hard. He wanted to leave, and he would call every night and just be, my goodness, he was just ugly, very belligerent, and saying he was going to leave, and just the ugly things that he would say to his dad. And I got on the phone with my people, my prayer warriors, and I immediately had them praying, for God to intervene and somebody to come into his life right there at the rehab center and talk to him. And that happened on more than one occasion.
Cool.
And even to this day, well, we know that, God has never left us. He's always been right here with us. Hunter ended up going to probably 11 or 12 detox and rehab facilities over
Wow.
the years. Yeah, he went to a lot.
What was the success of those situations? So I'm asking that in light of having interviewed a number of different addicts of different levels, family members, similar situations, even Dr. Rob Kelly, who he owns an addiction center now. What are your feelings about those detox centers? Do you feel like they helped? What was the situation surrounding that?
I feel like they helped somewhat. Of course, after his first rehab, and we didn't know anything.
How could you?
Yeah. We were the type of parents that our kids would never do that. We've talked to them from the time, they were itty bitty. Don't do drugs, say no to drugs. Our child wouldn't do that.
Right.
Our child did. But after he got out of his first rehab, I thought he was cured. He had been to rehab, and he was, in there for the 28 or 30 days, however long he was in there. And I just thought he was cured. And boy, was I wrong. I didn't know at the time that rehab doesn't look like this. It's not a straight line. It is, you relapse, you get better. You relapse, and it's just a mess.
Mm-hmm.
And we finally figured that out. I think in each rehab he went to, he learned something new every time. But the downside is, for me, and I think for Hunter, was, you meet people on the inside and they can give you new tricks.
Mm-hmm.
He was not a heroin user until he walked out of an NA meeting and somebody there had heroin. And that's when he started using heroin
Yeah.
at an NA meeting. And so that's disappointing. That was a shock to us when I found out he was using heroin.
How did you find out?
Well, he had moved to San Antonio to go to work for one of his uncles down there. And he had to come back for a couple of court dates that he had. And he went to one, and while he was gone, I went through his bags. And I'm a nosy mom, and you're in my house, and so I have the right to go through your things. And I did, and I found needles and this substance in this wrapped up in tinfoil, and spoons. And I always wondered where my spoons went, and they went to Hunter. Yeah. And so when he got home, I had all of that sitting out.
Mm.
And I confronted him with it, and he told me that it was heroin. And I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say, because I don't know that I would know what that is. Like,
Yeah.
if I saw it, I could maybe deduct spoons, needles, substance equals heroin. And I wanted to correct your wording too. I don't think you're a nosy mom. I think you're a good mom to look through stuff. I think any mom who's listening would do the same. That was a good mom would do the same thing.
Yeah. So the next day, he had another court hearing, and this time it was in downtown Fort Worth, and I decided to take him that time. And so we drove up to Fort Worth, and I didn't know it, but he had shot up heroin before we left.
About how old is he at this point?
He,
In his 20s?
yes, he was over 21. That he might have been 22, and he slept the whole way. I waited in the car for him because I didn't think it would take that long. He was meeting his lawyer in there, and it was the cold. It started snowing, and I was sitting in the car for 5 hours before I called the lawyer's office, and I was like, what is taking so long? Well, then my phone rings, and it's Hunter, and he's been arrested because he couldn't pass a drug test.
Mm.
And I went, well, you're just going to have to stay there because I'm not bailing you out. So I went home, and this was in December of 17, and it was right before Christmas. And we left him in there for as long as we could. He got out the 23rd of December, so right before Christmas. Those were the best 3 weeks of sleep that my husband and I had in a long time, because we knew where he was. We knew he was being fed. And so when he would call, he would, be pissed because we weren't bailing him out of jail right away. We're like, no, you're just going to have to sit there until, we can figure out what we're going to do. He had been talking to his lawyer, and we were thinking about sending him to a rehab in Lubbock, Texas.
Okay.
So when he got out, that's where we were going to take him.
And how many rehabs had he gone to at this point, do you think?
At this point, it was probably at least 6 or 7.
Okay, so this is not the first time. This has been a few.
Right. But this one was 5.5 hours away.
Okay. It's still in Texas.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
And it is actually the town where I am from. And
Okay.
so my family still lives there.
Okay.
But the lawyer recommended this rehab facility. And so we were going to take him there. But Hunter had to get some stuff from his apartment in San Antonio. And so my husband drove him to San Antonio to pick up, because he didn't bring that many clothes. So he had to go and, pack some clothes, pack some toiletries. Actually, you have to have everything new, toiletries and stuff when you're going into rehab. And they check it before, they check your bags and everything before you go in to make sure there's, nothing harmful in there. But he was going to go to detox first before he went in to the rehab. And this was in one day and night that we had to get this done. He had to be in Lubbock by 10 p.m. And so my husband and my son headed off to San Antonio, and me and my daughter stayed home. We were going to meet them there at a later time. And my husband called and said, we didn't know what time we had to have him there in the beginning, but he called and said, we have to have him there by 10, and I need you to be there with me. And I was like, okay. So my daughter and I, we are, just throwing stuff into bags, and we don't even know what we packed, and just threw it in the car and took off. Satan was doing his best to not get us there and to just blow this.
How many hours in between? Like, how long of a drive is this?
Okay, from San Antonio to Lubbock, it's probably 7.5 hours.
So it's a big trip.
And then from where I live to Lubbock, it's about 5.5.
Okay.
And, we're leaving at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and we have to be there by 10. Well, we get about an hour and a half out, and there comes a blizzard. We couldn't see 2 feet in front of us. And my husband, driving from San Antonio, mind you, my son is drinking all the way and taking Xanax and trying to jump out of the vehicle. And so my husband is, trying to get there as fast as he can, but also to keep Hunter from jumping out of the vehicle. And this gave my husband just terrible anxiety. And still to this day, he has a hard time driving on an interstate, driving long distances, because it brings back those memories of that trip.
Oh, I'm sure.
And yeah, but he's working on it, and so he'll get there.
He sure will.
But we did make it there by 10, by the grace of God, and he was put in the detox, and from there he went to rehab. He was there from rehab. He went to sober living, and he was there for probably 3 months, and he wanted to come back home. And I didn't want him to come back home. I wanted him to stay there, find a job, because that's where his sober community was.
Mm-hmm.
You're supposed to be around like-minded people. He had his meetings there, but he wanted to come home. And so I told him, if you come home, then, Mom's not going to do everything for you. I'm not making any appointments for you. You're on probation, so you're going to have to get yourself to probation, do your drug tests. Back then, I think he had random drug tests. So he had to call in every morning to see if he was supposed to be drug tested that day.
Through the state?
Yes.
Okay.
Or, yeah, the state. Yeah. So he did come back home. There was one time he had to pay probation, and he didn't have any money. And I wasn't going to pay for it. And so he was going around the house and looking at all of his stuff to see what he could pawn. And I did drive him to a couple of pawn shops to see, if he could sell any of his stuff. I guess he made a little bit of money because he got it paid um, without me or my husband giving him any money.
And that must have been tough as a mom,
It
you
is.
know, I mean, how many times have my kids asked for things and I'm like, no, 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 fine. You
Right,
know, that's
right,
that's that's tough when you see your kid, you know, and I
right.
give you credit for being like, nope, you got to figure it out.
And that is one of the things I had to learn was loving is completely different from enabling.
Hmm.
And I had to learn that difference. And I wasn't going to enable him anymore. He needed to take responsibility for his actions. And us always bailing him out wasn't doing him any good. And that's why when he was put in jail a couple of times, the first couple of times we did bail him out, but then we quit because that was only hurting him. He was put in jail. The last time he was put in jail, he had met this girl who was bad news for him. And he was arrested one night, and he was still in Lubbock, and I was actually in Lubbock for a funeral. And Hunter and I were supposed to go and have lunch before I left to go back home. And I kept waiting for his call and waiting for his call. I couldn't get a hold of him. Well, this girl gets in contact with me and says that Hunter had taken her truck the night before and she hasn't seen him, and goes on and on. And I said, well, I'm trying to locate him. And I got a hold of a friend of mine who is a DPS officer, and he dug around and found out that my son had been arrested. And so I was like, okay, I'm leaving, I'm going home. Hunter ended up calling me, and he goes, I guess you're not going to bail me out. And I said, you're right, I'm not. You're going to stay there. Well, a couple of days later, I get another call from that girl, and she wants to bail him out. And I was like, do not bail him out. And she ended up doing it anyway. And I told her, I will not pay you back for that. That's on you. I told you not to bail him out because he's going to go back to his same way he was. And that's exactly what he did. That was hard on me
I
when
imagine.
she
Yeah.
bailed him out. I mean, no, you don't want to see your child in jail, but when you know that that's probably the best thing for him, you love the addict, you hate the addiction. And I knew that he would go back to that, and he did.
You love
So
the sinner, you hate the sin.
that's exactly right. That's exactly right. And addiction doesn't just affect the addict, it affects the whole family. When Hunter had moved back home, he had moved in with his best friend. They had a trailer house together, and we thought he was doing pretty good. He had a great job, but he worked at night, and that was right after COVID hit. And so he was working from home. COVID hitting did a number on the mental health and addiction community. It did a number on all of us, but the mental health and addiction, they just really, really struggled during that time because they
Hmm.
couldn't see people in person. You couldn't go to your therapist in person.
Well, you also lost your community. A lot of
Exactly.
churches were not meeting.
Right.
I mean, the only things that were open really were like big box stores, strip clubs, and liquor stores.
Right. Right. And that just makes a huge difference doing it online versus in person. And so we get a call. It was probably 10 o'clock at night, and Hunter called. Their trailer house had caught on fire. And so he had to move back home with us again. And I wasn't thrilled about it. And our daughter was definitely not thrilled about it because
So
she
there's
had
what, 8 years between the two of them?
almost 6.
6. Okay.
almost 6 years. You know, when he was at home, all of us were like, we like walked on eggshells when he lived at home. It was not good. And so he moved back home, and a few weeks in, my husband, it was at night, and Hunter was supposed to be working, and my husband went up there to check on him, and Hunter was slumped over in a corner, and there was a needle full of heroin on his bed. And my husband told him that the next day he was going to have to leave because that was one of our boundaries. You are not going to bring drugs back into this house again. And so he broke that boundary.
Mm-hmm.
And as he was walking out the door the next day, I handed him 2 boxes of Narcan, which is, do you know what Narcan is?
Yeah, actually, it's kind of funny you say that. We had to explain that to our kids because we were on vacation and we went to this lake where at the boat docks, you know those like little mini libraries that are like those little boxes? Well, up this area where we like to take our boat, there's little mini boxes of Narcan.
That is good.
Yeah, and that's in Michigan. And then when we went on vacation to Sedona, Arizona, they're everywhere. I mean, they're just, which is sad but good, right?
Right, it is. But, you know, I carry Narcan wherever I go. I have it, yes. I have it in my purse. I have it in my car because you never know.
Right, right.
You never know.
Yeah. So sorry to interrupt you. You gave them 2 things of
I
Narcan or
gave
2
him
boxes.
2 boxes of Narcan, and he looked at me and he said, "You just sealed my fate." And I said, "No, I'm trying to save you." And so he left, and it was after that I went and just fell in my bathroom in a fetal position and was just, you know, bawling and crying out to God and, you know, just praying the hardest prayer. Um, you know, praying for God's will to be done and not my will, and praying for peace and understanding God's will no matter what his will was, and to give me peace about it. And I did. I had peace in my heart. I knew that God was going to take care of Hunter, and that just gave me chills. A couple of days later, I wound up in the hospital, and I truly believe that this was God saying, your body needs to rest.
Mm-hmm.
And I went in, they thought I was having a stroke, and it wasn't that. But for probably 15 hours, I was conscious, but kind of non-responsive, and I couldn't move. Like, it was
Wow.
like I was paralyzed. And all I
Did your
could do
body
was,
just completely shut down?
it just shut down.
Wow.
And I was aware, but I couldn't talk. I couldn't, you know, tell people how I was feeling. And so I was in the hospital for 3 days. And finally, I came out of it. But I believed that that was God saying, you're going to rest. You let me take care of Hunter, and I'm going to take care of you. You need to take care of yourself, you know. And so, yeah, that was not fun.
So he's living at home oh no, he's not living at home at this point.
Not at, yeah, he had to.
Okay. So what happened next?
So next, he went to a detox facility here in the Metroplex, and he had called the rehab in Lubbock and wanted to go back out there. And so this several weeks after I had gotten out of the hospital, and it was when that big, or I forget, you're not from Texas,
With
but it
the
was
ice storm?
when the big ice storm hit in 21.
Well, we remember that. You want to know why we remember that? We were building a house and all of the appliances, that was when the appliance shortage happened because of the
Right,
ice storm in
right,
Texas.
yes.
Yeah.
So that was during the big ice storm. and he was needed to be in Lubbock. And so I drove him back to Lubbock. And of course, like I said, my family lives there. So I have a place to stay when I go there. Dropped him off at rehab. Didn't go buy him anything this time. I was like, you bring your own stuff. I'm not buying you anything new. I'm not buying you new bedding. I'm not buying you snacks. You go in there and you get things done. And I know that he was getting stuff out of this rehab, but I don't know with this time if he was kicked out of that rehab. I never really understood what happened because he found another one that he wanted to go to, and it was a new one that had just opened in Lubbock. But there was a wait, and they had to wait for a bed to be open or to come available. And so he was in a very bad place. Of course, he had relapsed again. And, trying to wait for a bed to become available, he asked my dad if he could stay with him until that happened. It was only supposed to be like a day, 24 hours, maybe 36 hours. And I didn't want my dad to ever see my son like that. My dad is one of the strongest Christian men that I know, and loved my son, only brought love to him. No judgment, nothing. And so they stayed in my dad's motorhome until the bed became available. And my dad sometimes drives an 18-wheeler, and so my son would go with him and just lay in the cab. They have beds back there. Mm-hmm. So Hunter would, lay back there. He's detoxing off of whatever he's on, probably heroin. And that just hurts my heart because of my dad seeing that. But he made it. He got into this new facility, and it was wonderful. Hunter really dove into it, and he would call his dad and just be like, Dad, I know you've heard this before coming from me, but you have no idea what God is doing in my life right now. And, that we didn't see his face at that time, but, we could hear it in his voice. And we were we've heard this before, son. But he wanted us to come and visit, and so we did. He wanted us to meet the owners and some of his buddies, his sponsor, and all that. And so we did. And this was in February of 22, and right before the Super Bowl. And we went up there, and there was life back in his eyes. You could just see the change in him, and that he was really working on his steps, on, just staying sober. He told us he wanted to go to school to be a licensed professional counselor. He just wanted to help people like himself. And all through his addiction, he helped people through theirs. And I always said he could help everybody but himself. And that weekend, God was preparing us. And we had the best weekend with him. And had I known that the last hug I gave my son was going to be my last, I wouldn't have let go. Because he gave the best bear hugs. And he was like, Mom, I've got it this time. And, we truly believed that he did. And it was about 3 weeks later that we got the call. And it was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And we got the call that no parent ever wants to get. And he had passed away. He was at work. And we know that the place where he worked, his boss, and then the EMTs, they worked on him for over an hour, and he was just gone. And when the toxicology report came back, it was pure fentanyl that was in his system.
Had he done fentanyl before?
I think that he had, but mind you, he had been sober for 3 months.
So it was,
And so,
he didn't have that resistance
right,
anymore.
right. You can't go back and do the same amount that you were doing if you've been sober for so long. And I
Oh,
know
I'm
it.
so sorry.
Thank you.
I can't imagine. I really can't imagine.
Thank you.
That's a phone call no mother wants to have.
Absolutely not.
And I can see how having that last weekend with him was such a gift.
Yeah, it was. But Hunter fought his demons. But I'm here to tell you, Satan did not win. The drugs didn't win, because when Hunter was 4 years old, he gave his life to Christ. And he was baptized at 9. And when our beautiful boy took his last breath on March 8th of 2022, he was made whole again. He was free from pain. He was free from addiction. And Jesus welcomed him with open arms.
Whew, try not to cry.
And, some days are harder than others, but we know because of Jesus that we're going to see our boy again. And that is the hope that I cling to. Our son helped a lot of people in the recovery community. That was his passion, and to this day, his story is still being told. He is still helping others. If my son were here today, he would want anyone out there listening that has a drug problem, he would want you to know that your life matters,
Mm-hmm.
and that you are worth it, and not to give up.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm a little bit at a loss for words. I have interviewed a lot of people from a lot of different perspectives, addicts themselves, those in therapists, addiction counselors. This is the first time I've interviewed the mother. And there's something really unique about a mother's perspective that's making me a little teary-eyed. Because when you were talking earlier about how he liked to put his head on your lap and you rub his head,
Yeah.
so my son's 12. And even last night he came home from youth group and I was reading my book in bed, and that's exactly, Mom, can I cuddle with you? And then he always does. He always lays his head on my lap, and then I kind of like rub his little spiky blonde hair. He loves the nails. And so it's such a different perspective when you're hearing from a mother. It's so different than an addict themselves or someone who is an addiction therapist specialist. Yeah. And I'm a little bit for words. Maybe this is the perspective somebody needs to hear, that what it does to
I hope so.
mom, and that there's hope for people. There are so many resources out there.
Absolutely.
And I think it's so powerful that you're keeping his story alive. And I think that's so important, and keep doing that. Is there anything that you wanted to share as encouragement, maybe for another mother or a family member who's has someone in their life that's struggling like Hunter did? What would you want to say to them?
You have to take care of yourself. Like I said earlier, addiction is not just about the addict, it affects the whole family. And find a therapist, find a counselor, find a group. I thankfully was and still am a part of, it's called Winning the Fight. It's a nonprofit group that does support and education and provides resources for families that are dealing with addiction or loss to addiction. And get involved in something like that. But self-care, you've got to take care of yourself. Don't blame yourself. It's not your fault. And I know everybody goes through that. What did I do wrong?
Mm-hmm.
You didn't do anything wrong. And you can't make an addict get sober. They have to want it for themselves. And it is hard work. You will never find a harder working person than someone that is in addiction or trying to recover, a recovering addict. They work so hard every single day. They have to. And don't give up on them. Love them, but don't enable them. Set boundaries. The boundaries are not only for your child or loved one who are in the throes of addiction. Set boundaries for yourself. That's all I can think of right now, and I know I have many more.
Well, I think that was beautiful and so important.
Yes.
Yeah.
Self-care is so important. You know, they're going through their own journey, and you have a journey that you're going through yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And everything you're feeling is valid. Your anger is valid. I lost my train of thought.
Well, your confusion, your worry,
Yeah.
your anything. And it makes me think of something that my pastor said, and I've shared this on the podcast many times, and it just needs to be continued to be shared, is that oftentimes when we think of sin, we'll say addiction as a sin, right? We think it's just like a silver bullet straight just into the addict or the, whatever, name the sin. But really, sin is like a grenade. And what a grenade does is that it hits and then you have shrapnel. And that shrapnel hits, the ones closest to where the grenade went off the hardest. So that's mom, dad, brother, sister, family. But then there's multiple layers of shrapnel damage. And addiction is exactly that way, that it is not a bullet from a sniper. It has so many layers of effect. As you've demonstrated, you have a mom, a dad, a sister, a grandpa, a best friend, a relative, a boss. There's so many layers of people that were hurt, and
Right.
we don't think about that when we make our decisions. And we should.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, and addiction doesn't discriminate. It can happen to anyone. It doesn't care your economic status. It doesn't care what color you are. It just doesn't care.
Mm-mm. You're right. Yeah.
And that's why I have a passion for addicts. I just got back from a juvenile detention center this past weekend, and I was going there with a prison ministry. And because these kids need to know that they are loved, that they are not forgotten, and that they matter.
Yes.
And I really enjoy doing things like that and getting to interact with people I wouldn't interact with on a daily basis. It's very humbling.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's beautiful. Well, Crystal, anything else that you want to add before we close up?
Just thank you for having this platform that I get to tell my son and our story and share the love of Jesus. Just thank you very much.
Well, and your
And I'm glad
willingness,
I finally got to do it.
right, right. And your willingness to share and to keep your son alive. And I know that there's going to be somebody or many somebodies out there that need to hear this. It's going to make an impact. Even I think of Jill Klee, who's come on the podcast twice now. I told her that I know of a family that listened to her episode. They have a couple teenagers, and they sat around the kitchen table, which was a little weird for me, honestly, but they sat around the kitchen table and they listened to that episode as a family and said, this is why we say don't touch it.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I've even said to my own kids, when my husband and I were teenagers, could you smoke a little weed? Sure. Wasn't really that big a deal. Now?
No.
No. No, no, no. You can't touch it. You don't know if it's laced with fentanyl. You don't know where it came from,
Right.
what's in it. You cannot experiment
No.
now. And we shouldn't have experimented even then.
Right.
But now it could be life and death.
Absolutely.
So there will be people who hear this. Hopefully teenagers hear this.
Absolutely.
Mothers, fathers, aunts, uncles. So, Crystal, thank you. Appreciate you coming on. And if you're listening, please share, like, comment, hit all those buttons.
Yes, please.
And get the word out. And we'll see you guys next week. Bye.
Thank you.